today for our pizza and research event. My name is Amy Bowie, and I am one of the librarians here at the John Peace Library. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to our guest, Professor Thomas Yi, for his talk. So, our guest today is Dr. Thomas B. Yi. He is a composer and also assistant professor of instruction in theory and composition here at UTSA. What I find really fascinating about Dr. Yi's work is that it connects emotion, identity, and sound through video game music. So he actually got interested in composing because he was playing Super Mario, right? Like it's like one of the Mario
Singing games,
games,
yeah.
and suddenly he was like, I really like this music. So that was I guess, like the origin story. So he often blends the world of concert music with the familiar tones of classic gaming, showing how something as simple as a few 8-bit notes can carry deep meaning. His compositions range from pieces like Concerto Ludus for piano and Game Boy, which reimagines the sounds of early consoles, to Eva and the Angel of Death, an opera about Holocaust remembrance and forgiveness. Through both his art and his research, Dr. Yi explores how music helps us understand memory, justice, and who we are. He is also the kind of person who loves to bring people together, whether it's through cooking, teaching, or a good tabletop storytelling session. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Thomas Yi.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction, and thank you to you all for being here today on a busy Wednesday noon. And I'm glad that you could take part in this Pizza Plus Research event. I'd really like to just open up this conversation by finding out a few things about you, who you all are, and then I'll talk some about myself. So raise your hand if the following describes you. Raise your hand if you like playing video games, including mobile games, apps, social casino, words with friends, whatever. Okay, got a lot of hands there. Okay, so that's our first one. Raise your hands if you like listening to music, any kind of music. Rock, pop, rap, hip hop, classical music, doesn't matter. All right, so got a lot of hands there. Now, raise your hands if you like video game music. All right, yeah, that's a lot of hands there. Yeah, so some of you may be just wondering and curious. A lot of people already quite interested in video game music. All right, uh, now raise your hand if you recognize what I'm about to hum is. Da dun dun da dun dum bum 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 bum. Wanna hum with me? Bum 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 bum. Great. So what is that from? That's a Super Mario Brothers theme. Excellent. All right. Raise your hand if you have a favorite video game soundtrack. Favorite video game soundtrack. Raise your hand if you know what that is. Okay, I'm gonna go run around and find out some of what we have. What's yours? Half-Life. Half-Life. Very nice. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up.
Hollow Knight,
Hollow Knight. Yep. Very nice. Hollow Knight. Over here.
The Legend of Zelda,
Legend of Zelda. I want in the back.
Halo.
Halo, and over here in this corner. Can't get everybody.
Also Halo, but Halo Reach specifically.
Halo Reach specifically, and one more.
Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Okay, so a lot of great classics out there, some newer, some older. All right. So you know what your favorite video game soundtrack is. Raise your hand if you listen to video game music on a streaming platform. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Deezer, name it. All right. All right, so got a lot of hands there as well. And then last question here for you all. Raise your hand if you've gone to a live concert performance of video game music. So sometimes these are like candlelit, piano concerts. Sometimes they're orchestra ones. Sometimes it's like a rock band doing a cover. All right, we got some hands there as well. All right, so that's about you all. Now a little bit about me. Who am I? As Amy mentioned, I'm Professor Thomas Yi. I am a composer and a researcher of video game music. I call myself a lover of life, a seeker of meaning, and a creator for justice. Now, I also, in concrete terms, as I mentioned, I'm a composer, a music theorist, someone who studies about how music is made and the craft of music, and also an audio dramatist, someone who's very interested in podcasting, Dungeons and Dragons actual play, things like that. So my origin story, as Amy alluded to, I discovered my love of music not from going to the symphony, hearing Brahms or Beethoven, but what's often surprising for others in the music community, I discovered it from the beeps and boops of the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy. So the early game consoles growing up, and those soundtracks really permeated my ears and made their way into my musical soul. So it was always video game music that spurred my love for music making. Now, when I started getting into video game music as a research area, this was more in graduate school. So as I started to research in my undergrad and my graduate work, especially at UT Austin, I started getting interested in the burgeoning field of ludomusicology, which is the study of video game music, which was really just taking off at the time in the mid 2010s and continues to really grow to this day. So, you might not have been aware that there is a whole field dedicated to researching video game music, but there is, and we ludomusicologists are very excited and proud of that fact. So, I think lesson number one, just at a very broad level for all of you here in the room, uh, research something that you love. Let your research area, if you go on, into any sort of research field or just writing term papers for your classes, do research into something that you love and that you're interested in. Your interests are a guide to what you're passionate about and to what you have particular insight into. So, if, for example, I have friends who are doing I have a friend who's doing a dissertation right now in animal watching duck streams, right? So, there's like streams that you can go on and watch ducks swim around a pond. And she's doing her dissertation entirely on that topic. And there's so many different, there was another friend of mine just had a dissertation come out on hyperpop, which is a genre of music that they certainly would say didn't think that they could write a dissertation on when they were in your shoes. So don't let your take this from me as someone who's a faculty member here. Don't let your parents or your teachers dissuade you into sort of going into safer channels. Make sure you pursue the subject matter you love and find a way to turn that into research and into your degree. My parents certainly would be ones who, if I told them I wanted to study video game music when I was growing up and teach it and to write about it, they would have looked at me like I was crazy and tried to dissuade me out of that. Although, of course, you do need to still follow the rules for your assignments. Not every assignment can be turned into, I didn't turn every one of my papers into a video game music paper. Although I found a way to turn many of them into one. Lesson two, okay? So this, I think, it really fits with the theme of being here in a library. Research and writing can be fun. I mean, if you look at what I do, I get to sort of play video games for work, and I get to research video games and expand my knowledge and get to analyze things about them. So if you're going to spend most of your life doing something, or at least these 4 years as you're getting a degree and then moving into another professional field, make sure it's something that you enjoy, that you really get a lot of life out of. Okay, so that's my sort of intro. Now I want to start getting us into the subject of today's talk, which is listening to video game music. What does listening to video game music teach us? And to do this, I'd like to actually do a game demonstration of one of my favorite video games and favorite video game soundtracks, which is Gris. So I'm going to need 3 volunteer players because it really helps me not to have to play the game and talk over it. So raise your hand if you're interested in doing a live demonstration. And preferably someone maybe who hasn't played Gris yet, just because I want to make sure that we kind of don't have someone who already knows stuff ahead of time. Okay, so let's see. I know I saw your hand, so in the red sweater here. Yeah, so you can come on up. Let's see. Try to get people across the room. I have no idea whose hands went up. Would you like to do it? Yep, go ahead and come on up. And how about here in the red shirt? Okay. And now we are going to switch over the technology. So everyone cross your fingers for technology. Here we go. Okay. And here we go. Let's get 2 chairs for a couple of you. We're gonna go one at a time. Anyone can be first. The order doesn't really matter for me. The one doing the controlling. When doing the controlling, you can sort of step forward and look at, I would recommend looking at these side screens. There's no screen in the back, so you could look in the sides. Yeah, so what is your name? Chase. Okay, so we have Chase here. Come on, step on up. So I'll hand the control over to you. We're just gonna go new game right here and say Start a new game. Yes. All right, and we're off to the races. So, as we get started into this game, one of the things I really love about Greece is how it really intersects with art, visual art, and fostering aesthetic posture. So let's listen to this opening cutscene. So that was the opening cutscene to Greece. You can see that it thematizes a lot of things, colors, the visual aesthetics of the world, and feel free to just go ahead and play as we are talking. We end up in this sort of white space. As what you might have noticed was sort of this event of the statue of the older woman cracking and breaking, which sort of caused all the colors to fly from the world. Now I can see that you're experimenting with the button controls. Anyone try pressing something, see what happens? Oh, okay. You fell down there. Want to try that again? Maybe you just need to press it harder. Oh no, I still fell down. Oh, what's going on? So, in this opening level, in this sort of white space, whenever you try to do a button input, the main character, whose name is Gris, falls to her knees. You sort of have this idea of being sort of devoid of strength, being sapped of your strength as, well, I think we'll sort of maybe start to put together some of these interpretive stones in just a bit. You'll notice, though, that this is also an area that's completely devoid of color, other than Gris's hair. What else is it largely devoid of? What do we not hear at this point? We don't hear music. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Dr. Yi, you're supposed to be talking about video game music. Why are you giving us a silent scene? The reason is because we're sort of setting up this silent atmosphere and sort of a mood of anticipation, and also has that negative space of being robbed of something that we had in the beginning, these singing voices and the lush orchestration. Now we get some music in. Got a few sort of synthesizers, some piano timbres. You notice that our player is now able to move more freely. Try heading to the left. Let's see what happens if we go back the way we came. So moving with more rapidity, we have the jumps. Let's just listen to the soundtrack. a bit of a secret thing. If we head back to the left, we encounter sort of a broken, cracked statue of this adult woman, sort of in this prone position here. And I think that is really a key focus to interpreting what we have going on here. I've already gotten the achievement, so we didn't see it appear. But normally, an achievement would appear that says denial. Now, when we see denial is the first stage in a particular something, and we can head back to the right now. I think we're good here. Denial is the first stage in what? The 5 stages of grief. There we go. So this is sort of the first hint, and again, it's a secret area, but I wanted to show it to you. Gris is a game that centers around grief and the processing of grief, the experience of emotion, sort of the idea of when going through grief, when going through a traumatic experience, what is the quality of that like? And I think there's a lot that the music has to say about that. Now I think we can understand the silence that we had after the colors had been stripped from the world a little more clearly. All right, let's keep going and see where this takes us. Oh, by the way, have you tried hitting A yet? Let's see what happens. Yeah, so try one more time. It's kind of a sob, yeah, it's like a choked up sob. So when our player hits A there, which is one of the main control buttons, Gris, the main character, tries to take a breath and maybe attempt to sing like she was in the beginning. However, all that comes out is kind of this choked sob. Her voice has been sort of suppressed. She can't find her voice to sing, which again I think is a very elegant metaphor for this process of grief. And let's continue on and again see these really wonderful and beautiful grayscale at this point landscapes. For me as a music person, there's always something about the visual aspects, where the visual aspects are setting up something to be understood aesthetically, artistically. It makes us attuned to the audio stimuli as well. So let's see what happens if we proceed here. So we've recovered this mode of light, and you'll notice that it kind of put this audio cue out into the game world. It sounded like a ripple of different notes. We continue on from here. These little modes of light are important, but I think it's important to think of these modes of light as sort of containing this sonic energy or these musical pitches, and kind of see what the game does to start to build up on that idea. By the way, one of the things I really love about the game Gris is how it attunes us into thinking of game music both in a narrative sense and a gameplay sense. So narrative meaning pertaining to the story, the themes, this idea of processing loss and grief. Gameplay in the sense of having some relation to what the player is actually doing, trying to progress through the level. And we'll see that play out in just a second. Now collected a second mode of light, and let's see what happens here. Alright, so listen in for that. We heard dum bonk, and there was a little bonk at the end. So I think what we can see, both visually, 2 modes, 2 dots, and the third one we don't have yet, right? We only have 2 of these modes of light. So we even hear this musically. We hear this bum bum, and it kind of wants to go somewhere else still, but we don't have the note to complete that phrase, so we need to go look for it. That's an example of the ludic aspects of the game, the gameplay related ones coming into play. have a constellation of stars that's formed, a bridge, by connecting those two notes. Now, what do you all hear as we're walking across this bridge? More notes. Do they sound like they're in the same place as the underscore, the rest of the music that we hear? No, it's kind of like it's tinkly. It sounds like these little chimes, maybe like a star, but it sounds like it almost comes from another place, another time than the music that we hear surrounding. All right, so now that we have 3 of these modes of light, let's go back to that earlier space and see what happens. Notice there has not really been. We have our bridge. There really hasn't been much of any text on screen so far. It's all communicating to us through sound and through image. All right, that's going to be our first demonstration player, so we'll pass on to our second person. Let's give our first a hand. It was Chase, right? Nice to meet you.
Lauren.
Lauren? Lorraine. Okay, let's pick up with Lorraine. One of the things I love about studying video game music is that video games so often give you just an environment for you to exercise your own agency and your own experience. And we see that at play here, sort of giving us this more open environment for you to continue to explore and make meaning, and literally to oftentimes choose your own adventure in the context of the game. Alright, so in that brief scene and music cue, we have the grayscale landscape that has now had a color brought back, as you saw in the achievement. So we've now had red added back to the soundscape, or to the colorscape, excuse me. The soundscape now has returned to silence, kind of that preparatory, anticipatory mode of wondering what comes next and listening closely for what might happen. Just for a little bit on that music that we heard during the when the player steps into the statue's hand, we heard that. Na, 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 na. Anyone know where we might have heard that before? Any ideas? Oh yeah, in the back. The opening cutscene, yes, so that's correct. That's the same musical melody that happened in the opening cutscene when Gris, the main character, was singing along with the statue that looks like an adult woman. So we have this sense of sort of something returning, right, as the color red flows back. It's tying back to those narrative hook-ins, to the emotional hook-ins, and that brings us to this point. So in this temple environment, the motes of light, these notes that this main character had been collecting, has now gone up into the sky and created sort of 3 points in a greater constellation in the sky. I think we can now start to maybe put together a hypothesis about why those notes sounded out of place when we originally retrieved them. They sounded out of place, or what's known in music as out of key, because they sort of belong to another space up there in the sky and will come into play sort of later in the game. So as we're listening closely to this soundscape, these little musical hints, these minute details are sort of guiding us, helping us think about the narrative space and what that means, foreshadowing future themes. section, now followed by silence. This is often how video game music is structured. There will be these stingers that sort of come in to cue certain moments that the director and the writers really want to underscore. In this case, I think that really picturesque an image of Gris sliding down the slope, and which is actually a reference to an earlier art game known as Journey, which was quite impactful, has a similar scene and a great soundtrack as well. The cellos really swell to sort of create that connection back to that earlier game. Yeah, sometimes the cutscene takes over, but after this, I'm going to jump down. So we get our title music, and then we jump from the tower. Once again, many picturesque landscapes, and we land here. Let's go ahead and give our second volunteer, Lorraine, a hand. All right, now we're getting into one of my favorite parts of this opening third of the game. We're gonna have an audience participation moment coming up in just a bit, but we gotta get a little bit further. So we're very firmly in the area of red at this point. So we see a lot of red landscapes, a desert, right? Suggesting of pyramids in the background. And let's listen for the music as we continue on. So something happened there just now in the sound. What did we hear? Is the organ kind of changed? Yeah, you can go back there. Yeah, that's fine. So here's what we're gonna do as an audience, all right? We're listening, and sometimes when we listen to the game soundtrack, we listen for gameplay relevant cues and stuff that's going to affect what we do as a player. Sure, at this point, you've kind of heard this pattern of change, right? The calmer piano layer, and then this organ that comes in. Here's what I'd like you all to do. When we have, well, first we're all gonna close our eyes. Everyone close your eyes except for our player. When you hear that music coming, let's raise our hands like we're at Six Flags on the roller coaster. Let's do it one more time, and we'll raise it nice and high. We're being blown around by the sandstorm. All right, excellent work. So you all can open your eyes now for that. So what you see here, I think, is the ludic side, the gameplay side of this information, how the soundtrack is giving us information about playing the game. Our volunteer player here has been, sort of trying to work the way towards cover whenever these blowing winds come. But often what happens is you can't really tell exactly when the winds are going to come, except for that cross-fading layer of the organ that starts to creep in. So what you learn as a player is I need to listen to the music to help give me information that's relevant to playing the game. And again, that's that ludic side or the gameplay relevant side, whereas before we had maybe mostly things pertaining to the narrative. All right, and with that, I think we'll actually thank our volunteer player here and we'll move on. So, very good. We're good. Okay. So, there's this sort of an overview of ways that video game music, through this live demonstration, can influence our experience as players, influence it on an emotional level, on an experiential level, a narrative level, and yes, even on a gameplay level, like when we're listening for that organ layer sweeping in. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how video game music can inform our listening on an even deeper level, a level of identity and who we are as human beings. This really pertains to the subject of my book, which you can see here, some of the books I've written or contributed to in video game music. This is a book that came out last year, almost to the day, Gender, Race, and Religion in Video Game Music. So that's been my work for like past 5 years or so. And so what this book explores is how aspects of our demographic identity really can be brought out through video game music. So this is because, as in all things in music, I'm always teaching my students, whether in popular music, classical music, or video game music, that when we listen to music, it's not just listening to the notes or listening to the musical, the form or the melody or harmony. We're really listening to the kinds of kinds of people who listen to that music or who made that music. There's always a story behind the music, and we can often see that in various video games. So I'm going to take us through a couple examples. We'll see how many we get through. But the first couple are from Super Mario Odyssey. Now, this, of course, is a Super Mario game, so we're sort of, I think, a lot of us are familiar with those conventions. It follows Mario journeying around a vaguely Earth-like planet as he visits sort of various cities, kingdoms, or countries that are the levels of the game. And so what I realized early on is that this set up a situation where each of the kingdoms that he would visit would sort of correspond not just as like a fantasy world, but to some kind of a real life culture or real life nation. And so from this, I have the concept of racialized fantasy, which is one of my biggest contributions to the field. A fictional world with cultures or populations designed with traits associated with a particular real world culture or population. You could think, for example, of Avatar: The Last Airbender with nations that refer to Japan and to China, to Inuit and Inupiat clans and the like. So in Super Mario Odyssey, you have these tracks in these various zones, and the music, of course, also tries to portray something about the culture. So I wanted to play two sort of contrasting musical examples, and we'll discuss each of those. But I want you to listen closely, and the question I have for you here for Tostarena Town, which is in the Sand Kingdom level, is how is particularly Mexican and also other Latin American musical identities or styles being communicated in the track, and that could be communicate well or sometimes maybe even less well. So let's go ahead and listen to this example of Tostarena Town. All right, so what do we think? I can walk around and maybe get some responses here. So, any ideas? How do we have cultural identity being communicated? I'll start back here.
One of the main sounds you can hear is obviously la cucaracha, kind of playing in the underneath the trumpets.
So a little bit of intertextuality referenced in La Cucaracha there. How about here?
It's playing instruments that are known in like mariachi, for example, like the trumpet, the guitar, the like I forgot the bongo. I don't know how they're called. And then the violin, which are traditionally mariachi sounds.
Yeah, so a trumpet, there's violin, guitar, I think we heard as well. I saw a hand over here. I'm going to try to make my way around. Excuse me. Hand over here? Nope. Mariachi. So are we hearing a reference to mariachi style? You get that right. The trumpets, I think, communicate that very clearly. You sort of have this idea of referencing mariachi to try to carry this attribution of Mexican musical identity. Now, something interesting arises here. because when I started researching this track, I went and took it to the School of Music's mariachi directors, right? So wanted to hear from the people making the music, and they had a whole bunch of notes that they came back with. Because here's the thing: while we can hear the reference to mariachi, it's actually not like very good mariachi. Okay, there are a whole slew of things that got back on this, but for just one example, the bass line, we hear this dum bum 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 bum. I see people kind of already shaking their hands. That mixes up the mariachi tradition's bass line, which would be a little more like dum bum 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 bum, so a little straighter, not that tresillo. It mixes it up with that from a different Latin American country, Cuba, the son cubano, which has more of this tresillo feel. So that's just one example of sort of one of these cross-ups that happen that sort of muddy the picture of communicating Mexican musical identity through this track. So we can still see that's like the main attempted referent is through mariachi, but there's a whole bunch of things that actually make it maybe more problematic, not as a good of a representation. In contrast, let's take a look at a next example. And this is going to be from a later level, which is Bowser's Castle. So this one has a bunch of reference to Japanese musical culture. And what I did is I found a video from Nintendo that showcases the Japanese instruments used alongside some European classical ones. Let's take a look. All right, so what do we think communicated Japanese musical identity in that track? It's okay if you don't know the instrument names, I can fill that in for you, but what did you notice? Those things, yeah, over here.
The shamisen, I believe, the stringed instrument.
Yeah, so there's a shamisen shown at the end. That was the plucked instrument that went ding 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 ding. So certainly a traditional Japanese instrument. Anything else? Yeah, in the back.
There was this woodwind like long flute like instrument. I'm not sure what it's called. I'm sorry.
All right, yeah. So in the opening, we had that bamboo woodwind instrument. That's known as a shakuhachi, another traditional, originally a instrument used by Buddhist monks. So we got those. Any other instrument types? Just call it out. Drums, yeah, we got drums. Those would be the taiko. So a lot of different types of instruments being used. Now, what I found interesting about this example is that unlike the mariachi, the tostarena example that sort of tried to just be mariachi, kind of this more stereotypical picture of Mexican musical culture, this one actually mixed these Japanese instruments with sort of Western European strings with Western European brass, which you saw pictured. And that was actually a key thing to, I think, making the success of the track. It wasn't sort of one-dimensional or stereotypical. It brought the Japanese elements into dialogue with other elements of musical culture. So there was that idea of using cultural elements to tell a larger story or sort of make a larger musical point. I cover that more, of course, in the book. Let's go ahead and end just with one last one here, and then we'll open up for Q&A. This is from one of my favorite recent video games, Genshin Impact, which is a gacha mobile and console game. And this is from one of the boss battles of the Inazuma area. So it's based on Japan, once again, but it's composed by a Chinese composer, Chen Yupeng, and made by a Chinese studio. So this is called Thunderings of the Merciless. And what I'm going to do is skip to a later part, and you're going to hear some familiar Japanese instruments, shamisen, koto, shakuhachi, some of the ones that we just saw pictured. But you're going to hear them sort of in dialogue with some other elements. And I'd like you to listen, and maybe we'll talk about what those are and how those are used. So let me try to find this exact spot. Okay, coming up. right. So that's that boss battle track. So one of my favorites, I think, in video game music, both soundtracks and tracks. So first of all, did we hear some Japanese instruments? Shakuhachi, that bamboo woodwind instrument. We got shamisen, the string instrument, a little bit of koto in there as well. So we heard the Japanese instruments. What else did we hear? Yeah, I got some here.
Was that an electric guitar?
Definitely electric guitar. Yeah, so electric guitar doubling the shakuhachi. It's one of my favorite textural layers here. Anything else, Mark?
We got this interesting kind of dubstep feel in the background that's kind of blending in everything together to make a whole new music.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, and we can just mic drop right there. So, yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it, right? We have the influence. Hopefully, you can hear of like electronic musical styles. Certainly more of a danceable beat, like but also those elements of dubstep with the processing. So I think Mark really nailed it on the head there. And ultimately, I think this goes to that point of using the cultural elements, the ones that are more traditional Japanese, together in dialogue with these sort of technological dubstep, not owned by sort of one place or culture, to create a larger argument here, this sort of larger musical trajectory of this battle track that fuses both EDM and Japanese traditional musical styles. And that's a lot of what my research is about, sort of going deeper into cultural representation, gender representation, religious representation, and looking at what the music tells us about sort of those interesting dialogues and those interesting ending results. So I'm going to go ahead and close there, but we still have 5 or 10 for Q&A if you can stay. If not, thank you for coming out. And you can check out my books that I've contributed to, or my cards, of course, if you want to reach out, up here at the table. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll take some questions here.
Never mind. Okay, so this is my favorite portion, Q&A. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll run the mic over to you. Oh, okay, we already have one. All right, one sec.
Have we, or do you think we will see video games influence like normal music in like recent years or upcoming years?
All right, great. Yeah, thank you for that question. So I would definitely say that we have been seeing video game music influence, commercial music, sort of in the larger industry. In my own research, I look at a lot of a genre called chiptune, which uses the 8-bit musical styles that I grew up really listening to, and that helped get me into music, and see how those are used in commercial music tracks, in film scores, and in other genres. And so I actually have a whole like growing list of maybe 40 or 50 or so songs that use chiptune in some form or fashion on my Spotify. And the music that we heard coming in when we were getting ready, just the pre-music set list was all chiptune music. So not music from a video game, but rather music being used using the sonic resources of a video game, particularly retro video games. So thanks for that question. I see one over here, and I know we have one in the back as well, but let's see. Okay, I'm going right here first. All right.
What was one of the first instances of a video game using the symphony orchestra rather than chiptune?
You're talking about a video game soundtrack that used a recorded orchestra? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like which one was like one of the earlier or first video games to use the symphony orchestra?
All right, great. That's a great question. So there's sort of like 3 main stages of video game music history. There's the 8-bit era, which uses sort of the beeps and boops, right? You have the NES, the Game Boy, the Commodore 64. Then you have the general MIDI area, which uses sort of these, basically it's like what you would find on like a Yamaha keyboard, where they sound like instruments, but not quite. That's going to be like your Super Nintendo, your N64, your Sega Genesis. And then you get to just using MP3 or OGG video, audio files, which would be just playing, anything you could record, you can use on the instrument. So the question here is basically, when did that start to turn from maybe the general MIDI era into the full MP3 and full wave eras? One example I can think of which sort of blurs this boundary is from Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, quite a well-known example. In that game, it's mostly a general MIDI soundtrack, but on the last final boss battle against Sephiroth, known as One-Winged Angel, the track, it uses samples from choir and samples from an orchestra that basically they just committed that level of memory to put an MP3 on the disc. So that they're able to sort of play a more cinematic sound that stood out at the time for having at least some incorporation of live recorded audio. So thank you for that question.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, what are some of the difficulties or limitations that composers may run into? Like, say, for example, when they are trying to do or score the underlying track, how do they account for the random variable of players interacting with something that requires Ludo engagement?
Right, yeah, that's an excellent question. So my answer to that would kind of be two-part. One, there's sort of like a workflow limitation where a lot of times the video game composers are being asked to create music as a reference as the world is being built out. So you might not actually know all the conditions of the game environment until a later point. So it's like you've made a track and then you have to adjust it to sort of have a fade out or to break out into more stems or layers so that you can turn off or on some of them in a dynamic way. The technical aspect to Oliver's question here is that there's special software that allows for dynamic audio, meaning audio that responds to the player's actions in the game environment. The main one of this is Audio Kinetics Wise software, WWISE, and the other one is Fmod. Both of these softwares basically allow you to create logic where you can say, if a player does this, then this sound plays. If a player spends this amount of time in this area, then there's a 50% chance of this layer playing. So that's how you can create the soundtracks that sound more alive and respond to player environments. Gris had a little bit of that, but it was mostly sort of more linear. So I'd have to show a different game example to show that off. All right, thank you for that question. And I think maybe our last one over here. Sorry, we are running a little close on time. Actually, maybe we can get two more. Yeah, over here.
There you go, Bus.
I believe it was said that you are also a composer.
Yes.
I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've worked on? I've also played around with chiptune, so I'm also quite curious about that. I'm sorry.
All right, yeah. So I'm happy to sort of give my cred for all those. So not so much on the video game soundtracks themselves, but in concert music that is influenced by video game music. I have several pieces and more coming that use chiptune music. So the main one is called Concerto Ludus. Concerto like Concerto. Ludus, Ludus. There's a piano version that was recorded up at University of Michigan, and there's an orchestra version that was premiered at South by Southwest up in March, so up in Austin. We did it with KMFA and Density 512. So both of those pieces draw on the 8-bit retro video game music sound world, but with a live orchestra or a live piano playing to a picture of a like pixelated video game environment that one of my animator friends constructed. I also have an artist persona that I'm trying to sort of launch and get off the ground shortly called Chiptune Symphony, which will make chiptune arrangements of classical music pieces, kind of serving the professorial purpose of sort of bringing some of these pieces to a wider audience, but also, of course, honoring the sound of video game music that brought me to love music in the first place. So thank you for that question. I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you so much, everyone.